Blended Podcasts. Brought to you by Blended Audio.
What does a healthy, balanced lifestyle consist of? How should you eat? What exercise should you be doing? How many hours of sleep do we really need? Does too much water flush away all your vitamins? Should it be high carb, low fat, or high fat, low carb? The more research you do, the more confusing it gets, because there is so much information out there, and there are so many conflicting opinions. So how are we supposed to know? Stick around to explore the different approaches to health with us, physically, mentally, and emotionally, and let's try to figure out together what the heck being healthy really means. I am your host, Hazel Priscilla, and this is your weekly dose of Feed Me Honesty. Welcome yet again to your health accountability partner, Feed Me Honesty. Seeing that we all spend about as much as a third of our time on today's topic, you'd think with all that experience we ought to be experts by now, but for some reason, this is something the majority of us are yet to master. That is probably why Netflix accurately named their documentary The Mystery of Sleep. In studio today, to help attempt to unravel this mystery, we have fellow podcast host Massimo Meneghetti. Massimo, welcome to Feed Me Honesty.
Hello, and thank you for having me on this podcast. It's a great pleasure. I'm really looking forward to talking about sleep with you today. Just a bit of background about myself before we get started. I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a health professional of any kind. All my research comes from a long history of having difficulty with sleep and a long history of trying to understand sleep. And I'm not alone in that. Sleep has been largely a mystery to us, to humanity, until about the 1950s. And really, what we used to think happened was that when we slept, we thought that our brains shut down, and that was that. But we've discovered that sleep is one of the most complex phenomenons that happens in the human body, and is actually an incredibly active process. And the fact that it's so active and the fact that so much happens when you sleep tells us that sleep is very important for us. And there's some very interesting health facts about the effects of sleep on large populations and what happens when you gain or lose just 1 hour of sleep per night. So, according to the current science, the only correct or the minimum correct amount of sleep to get per night is 7 hours. Anything below 7 hours, and you apparently start to notice some serious declines in your ability to function. You notice some serious cognitive declines, you notice changes in mood and appetite, you notice changes in learning capabilities. And what happens every year overseas is a massive experiment on sleep called daylight savings. And really what daylight savings is in the summer, time gets bumped backwards an hour. So 8 o'clock becomes 9 o'clock, and in winter it gets bumped, it's the other way around. In summer it gets bumped forward, in winter it gets bumped backwards. And the idea is to create more hours in the day. But now, what happens when people are essentially given an extra hour to sleep in the summer months is that we notice en masse massive reductions in heart attacks, as well as massive reductions in car accidents.
I think it's is it 24% or something? I wrote it down. I think there is a statistic on was it the Netflix episode where they, I think it was the Netflix episode. Let me just double check. Yeah.
I don't have the statistics on the heart attacks, but what I do know is that as far as driving goes,
accidents.
Yeah, when we introduced anti-lock braking systems, those reduced accidents by 2 or 3%.
Wow.
And those were regarded as a revolution in safety and driving safety.
Okay, just a second. I found the statistics here that I have. In spring, when we lose 1 hour of sleep, we see a 24% increase in heart attacks that follow that following day. And then in autumn, when we gain an hour of sleep, we see a 21% reduction in heart attacks. So that's just heart attacks. That's a big increase and decrease. And then you were talking about accidents.
Yeah, it's a massive increase and decrease, and it's important to understand that heart attacks are, they're something that happens when the body is under duress and under stress a lot of the time. And the fact that 1 hour of sleep difference in the spring and winter months
makes such a big difference.
It's incredible.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And so to get back to driving, the anti-lock braking system reduced accidents by 2 or 3%.
Yeah.
And they find that when daylight savings gives people an extra hour to sleep, accidents fall by up to 60 to 70%.
Oh my goodness. And if that's in 1 hour extra sleep, imagine what like 2 or 3 hours of extra sleep could do to
or
the
2 or 3
statistics.
hours less of
Or
sleep
less, yeah. Even worse.
And those sort of massive health implications of sleep have created a much deeper study into sleep, and we've really sort of tried to nail down why this experience is so important. And fairly recently, I think in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s, we were able to figure out sleep in terms of its fundamental stages. So every night you go through sleep cycles, and those cycles are made up of 4 stages. The first 3 stages are what you term non-REM sleep, and REM stands for rapid eye movement.
I didn't even know that. Like, I know REM sleep is your deep sleep, but before I did this, I was like, but what does it stand for? And then I was actually quite
surprised.
I was like,
and then an interesting thing is that you can see rapid eye movement sleep in pretty much any animal. If you have a cat or a dog at home, you can watch them, and there's a certain point where they're sleeping, you can see their eyelids moving very fast behind their eyes, and that's when they start kicking, barking, chasing stuff in their dreams.
And that is related to the dream state. The REM sleep is dreaming, when you're dreaming,
Correct, yeah. So rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep, is dream sleep. So that's stage 4. So sleep really has 4 stages, 3 of them which don't necessarily involve dreams, and 1 which very importantly involves dreams. So to break it down, what happens is you enter stage 1, and stage 1 is the lightest of sleep, and that's the stage where people report like falling or jerky or all these weird things as your body's slowly settling itself into the sleep state, but not quite there.
I've heard that when that happens, it feels like you're falling or something. It's like your body's testing if you are still asleep, or if you are reacting or not.
Exactly, and the reason it's doing that is because it needs to figure out if it's time for stage 2.
Okay.
So this is also another thing, just to loop back a little bit. The reason we have so many accidents when people lose sleep is because of micronaps. So micronaps are these tiny periods of sleep where your brain just cuts out and you don't even realize you're no longer conscious. And stage 1 and stage 2, stage 1 can happen sometimes just in the world, and the reason you jerk is in case you're driving a car or, operating a sword or something.
So it's actually a really good thing.
Exactly. It's a protective mechanism, because an interesting thing to note before we really get into all of this is that sleep doesn't really make sense evolutionarily. We are creatures that need to forage, create, and protect ourselves. We're quite weak and fleshy. We need houses, we need food, we need fire, we need warmth. And the fact that we have an entire 8-hour period every single day where we're essentially useless is very interesting, because we really shouldn't. We should be active 24/7. That would be the most efficient biological organism, but it's not the case. All animals everywhere in nature sleep. So we, and I'm sure other animals as well, have developed these protective mechanisms. One is these jerks. So if you're jerking and it's not a good time to be falling asleep, you'll wake up. But then if you are in bed and actually sleeping, then in stage 2 your body begins to shut down. your temperature begins to drop, and your brain begins to produce a hormone that actually paralyzes you in a sense, so that you don't act out your dreams, act out what's going on.
Something that really shocked me is that I think it was also in the Netflix documentary, they said our brains are more active during REM sleep than when we are awake. And I could never have imagined that my brain would be more active while I'm sleeping than while I'm awake.
Yeah, so certain things do plummet while you sleep, but certain non-conscious functions, because your brain operates on a sort of conscious and subconscious level throughout the day. And what happens when you sleep is your conscious functions plummet, but your subconscious functions skyrocket. And because of the way humans work, your subconscious brain is actually, it's not larger, but it's usually processing way more data than your conscious brain. Your conscious brain just deals with what's immediately important. Your subconscious brain deals with everything else. So there's a hell of a lot more going on there.
And that's why some things need to shut down, because you don't want to act out your dreams. You don't want that to happen.
Exactly. You don't want to roll over and punch your partner in the face.
A nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. So your body actually locks you in. And this locking in is also why people experience sleep paralysis. It's just a miscommunication of chemicals where you feel locked in but conscious instead of locked in and unconscious. It's also what fails when people sleepwalk. They don't have this hormone produced.
So that's a problem when you have a sleep disorder. Like I saw on the Netflix documentary, this guy, suffocating his wife, or basically he's on top of her and he's acting out his dream and he's busy killing his wife, and obviously she's luckily awake and she's screaming and trying to get him on top, but she can't get him to wake up out of this state. So that's where sleep disorders come in.
Didn't know about that story. That's pretty intense.
I've heard about it before, but it's actually a thing where people, it's not always like you're doing something bad, but might kick the person sleeping next to you, or punch them, or pinch them, or something.
Absolutely, and it's fundamentally a malfunction that. So it's also, most people don't have sleep issues. That's a lot of people say, I must have some sort of sleep disorder, I must have some sort of this or whatever. It's actually such a tiny fraction of the population that has a genuine sleep disorder. So for most people, when stage 2 works and your body begins to lock you into the deeper stages of sleep, you then progress into stage 3, which is deep sleep.
Is that REM sleep, or can that happen before?
No, this is just before REM sleep.
Okay.
But now, interestingly, deep sleep is the most restorative part of sleep.
So that's what you really need.
It is. You need all of it.
Yeah.
So what happens is, if you have a night of sleep and you wake up feeling particularly rested and particularly fresh, you have gone into deep sleep slightly more than you would have on a normal night.
Okay.
And the reason you feel particularly refreshed and rested is because your body starts producing HGH, which is human growth hormone. That starts to literally repair your muscles and repair the physical damage done from the day. And your immune system also starts to repair itself. A lot of people talk about immune boosting supplements and immune boosting this and that. And really the only thing that science knows about for sure that boosts your immune system is deep sleep.
Oh, wow.
And then finally, after deep sleep, you enter your REM, or rapid eye movement, or dream state.
So that's only the last stage.
That's only the last stage. So now what happens is it's not a linear thing. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you wake up in the morning. You cycle between all 4 phases about every 100 to 120 minutes. And as the night goes on, as you sort of stock up on deep sleep, your stages 1, 2, and 3 get shorter, and your stage 4 gets longer. And that's why your dreams are freshest when you wake up in the mornings, because you've just been in REM sleep. But now there's very interesting things about REM sleep, because REM is what they think where we correlate all the data and process all the data and all the information we've got in a day. So it's really our brain and our memory's mechanism of taking everything we've learned and integrating it with our subconscious.
So that's why Professor Matthew Walker also says that you need sleep after learning to hit the save button, and you also need sleep before learning to prepare your brain.
100%, yeah.
So tell us about the study that they did on the, I don't know if it fits here, but on the group of students. Do you know about that study where I think it was actually in the TED Talk that Professor Matthew Walker did. They took two groups of students. The ones they didn't give any sleep the whole night. They kept them awake. No coffee, no anything. And then I think they had like a 60% drop in their marks the next day or something. And the other group of students, so they both studied the same amount. It's not like the one group studied more. The only difference was the one group slept more than the others. The other group had like 8 hours of sleep. And it was like the opposite. So they scored like 40% better or something. So then Dr. Matthew said, like, because before an exam, you sometimes think, I need to pull an all-nighter,
Yeah.
And that's actually counterproductive, because those students then, their brains are so tired that they can't recall anything that they studied. And the group of children who had 8 hours of sleep performed much better, even though, they had the same amount of information going into their brains. So that's why I said it's much more advised to actually sleep before an exam. You'll perform better than cramming in another 2 or 3 hours of studying and thinking that's going to help you score better marks. And that can be the difference between failing and passing. 40% is a big difference. That's literally passing or failing.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's also, it doesn't only relate to logic-based things like tests and exams.
Yes.
It's your entire life that sort of goes downhill if you don't sleep. So they've done other studies with muscle memory. And what they did was they got some professional basketball players, and they got they got two groups. They got one group of like 5 to practice 3-point shots. And they just sat with basketballs, shooting them into the hoops all day. Then the other group, who were already quite good at this, it's important, were told to just think about what they think they need to practice 3-point shots.
So doing it in their minds.
And they realized that after a good night of sleep, the group that didn't actually touch a basketball the day before only visualized had pretty much the same improvement in skill as the group that was physically practicing every day.
Wow.
And they haven't really done this study in terms of depriving people of sleep while they're doing it, but they do understand that really what's happening is that your muscle memory is integrating into you as you sleep. And it's quite crazy that this all happens in the dream state, because it becomes so important that if you starve yourself of REM sleep for too long, your brain is just so desperate for it that it starts to spill over into waking consciousness.
Yeah.
And this happens with alcoholics a lot. When you drink and you pass out, you don't actually enter into a proper sleep cycle. It's more of a suppressant than a...
Is it the same with sleeping pills?
Yes, 100%. Sleeping pills are actually they may help put you to sleep. They may help keep you asleep for the whole night, but they definitely are not actually helping the functions of sleep.
Yeah, so Professor Matthew Walker also said that sleeping pills are blunt instruments that don't produce naturalistic sleep, and therefore they are not helpful at all. So if it was only such a quick fix, but unfortunately there are no quick fixes. Yeah,
there really aren't any quick fixes for sleep. And just to bring back to the alcoholics, you starve your brain of REM sleep for long enough and you start becoming delirious. And your subconscious starts spilling over into your waking conscious. And that's just wild. Your brain doesn't do anything else like that in any other facet of life. And it just goes to show you how important that integration of subconscious and conscious is in stage 4.
So what can happen if your subconscious spills over into your conscious, like in your wake state?
You become delirious. You start hallucinating.
You did say.
You full on start hallucinating.
And then you start to think you're crazy, and you take meds probably for that, and then those meds have other negative effects or numb you even more.
Exactly, and so there was a radio DJ back in the 60s who tried to break the world record for staying awake, and he did a radio show from Times Square, so he was in like a little booth and everyone could see him and whatever, and he tried to hit 8 days.
Oh my goodness. What was the previous record?
I think 7.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so on day 3, he started hallucinating spiders in his shoes.
On day 3 already, and he wants to stay awake for 8 days.
He started hallucinating spiders in his shoes. On day 4, because it was Times Square and there were people walking around, he started to think that the people walking around were agents of foreign intelligence services sent to collect data on him and study him. So he totally lost the plot, just after 4 days of not sleep.
Did he make the 8 days?
No. I think the doctors and scientists pulled the plug on that experiment quite quickly, because it is... People joke around with sleep. You know, a lot of people try to work many late hours. They try to stay awake all night. They may party. They may take drugs. They may do all of these things. And what we don't realize is that you can damage your brain from not sleeping. It's not quite a thing of, oh, it was bad that time, let me have a nice sleep this weekend and everything's okay. Some people cause permanent brain damage to themselves by staying awake for too long.
I know that the World Health Organization has also classified any form of nighttime shift work as probable causes of cancer because of a disruption of your sleep-wake rhythm. So I always wonder about people who now have to work night shifts and stuff, because obviously then you have time to sleep in the day, but because of your internal clock and because of like the noises and the sunlight and whatever else, it's very hard to sleep during the day, especially 8 hours. So even if you get like 3 hours or 4 hours of sleep in, you're never catching up on that sleep.
100%. And even if you sleep a perfect 8 hours in the day, because it's not at night, your brain doesn't do the same thing.
Oh, okay.
So night shift work, eventually, after years and years and years, you catch up to it, but it does alter what's called your body clock or your circadian rhythms.
Which we're going to talk about more in episode 2, right?
100%. And I believe this is a good segue for us to say that, you know, if you want to find out the reality, because really the way we're talking about sleep now is ideally. Almost no one actually gets 8 hours of sleep a night, and that causes problems.
I have to say I do. I really do. And I feel great.
One of the lucky few. Yeah. Well, that causes massive problems in the way your body regulates itself. And there are ways in which you can fix that, and there are ways in which you can mitigate, although not totally bypass, the negative side effects of that. And if you want to hear about it, please stick around for episode 2.
Yeah, so not episode 2 of this podcast, but episode 2 of the sleep episode. So it's going to be a 2-part episode because there is just so much to discuss. So part 1's just going to be an introduction to sleep, which is what we're doing now. And then part 2, which is going to be next week, is going to be, what did he call it? The reality of sleep. Because what if you have a newborn baby, or what if you have a nighttime shift work, or what if you have a sleeping disorder? Like, we'll discuss all of those things in next week's episode. But I think we need to get back to the sleep cycles. Which stage are we at now? Was it stage 4? We discussed all 4 stages, but you were saying that you don't only do 4 stages every night, but then you go back to stage 1 and then back to stage 2, 3, 4.
Exactly,
So how many of those cycles, depending on how long you sleep, maybe 3, 4?
Well, so it's about 100 minutes. So yeah, about 3 or 4. Lucky if you're lucky, you get 5. And what's cool, what maybe a lot of people don't know, is you do get sleep tracking technology these days.
Yeah, I know about that, like apps on your phone or watches, I think even. Or...
Yeah, so I've got with me a little watch here that tracks my sleep stages.
Let me see it.
little
What's this watch
Fitbit.
called? Oh, it's a Fitbit.
Yeah. So it's not every Fitbit that tracks sleep stages, but some of them do, and it's quite cool actually. They're certainly not perfect trackers. To get proper sleep tracking, you still got to be hooked up to sort of 18 different wires and have a whole cap on your head and all sorts of electrical impulses being read. But in terms of gathering data on your long-term sleep patterns,
Gives you a good indication.
it's really useful, and I, in my own life, have been finding, they say the more deep sleep you get, the better you feel. But I've noticed I wake up and I go, wow, I'm feeling way better today. And then I check my little app and it's like, oh, wow, I got more deep sleep last night.
Okay, so it's for real. It's proved.
It's pretty, I wouldn't say it's proved, but it's pretty immediately correlatable.
Okay.
You can correlate it pretty immediately. And I think that's something a lot of people should maybe get into,
What about if you sleep too much? Like, I know, for example, if I sleep 8 hours, I kind of feel tired. Like, I feel like that's too much for me. When I sleep 7 hours, I feel like that's kind of the sweet spot, even sometimes 6 hours. But over a weekend, or if you feel very tired and you sleep 10 or 12 hours, I always wake up feeling more exhausted.
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
So
or what's happening there?
There's nothing bad going on.
Okay.
So really they say the cutoff for sleep is 7 hours. So you can quantify what
Of the
happens.
minimum, like at least 7.
Yeah. So you can quantify what happens if you sleep for less than 7 hours, but you can't quantify what happens if you sleep for more than 7 hours.
Is it more beneficial, do you think?
Definitely.
More restoring and stuff happening.
It seems from doing the research and looking into it, it seems more sleep is always
You
more
can't
beneficial.
get enough.
You can't get enough.
That's good news.
Yeah, that's very good news for our late sleepers and stuff, but also for our weekend sleepers. You can't keep a sleep bank. So if you sleep 4 or 5 hours a night every night in the week and think you're going to catch up on that on the weekend, that's just not the case.
Not how it works.
The science on this is not exactly complete. So if you have a difficult night job in your 20s but then get back to good sleep in your 40s, there's a good chance that you're going to
It's going to catch up with you.
You're going to catch up, you're going to restore your brain, you're going to fix yourself. But at least in the immediate term, if you aren't sleeping properly for 5 days out of the week and try to sleep extra for 2 days, you're getting all the cumulative damage of those 5 days, and then on those 2 days, they're essentially isolated incidents. So you sleep nicely on Friday night, you just fix Friday's damage. Same with Saturday night. So it's not really a thing you can do long term to take from your sleep bank during the week and try pay it back on the weekend. What's better really is to try be consistent, even if your consistent sleep is less than the required.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, and
that's probably more doable as well,
Yeah, and it also keeps your circadian rhythm and your body clock in check.
Yeah.
Whereas if you are changing your sleep patterns for 2 days out of the week, Sunday night you're always going to feel weird. You're always going to go to bed way too late. You're always going to start Monday on a bad foot. So it's more important to keep a consistent sleep.
Even over weekends, during the weeks.
Yeah, and this may be a good part to introduce what they call sleep hygiene.
Okay.
So there are a couple of steps of sleep hygiene.
Is that like what to do, what not to do?
Yeah, it's just it's
Tell us what we should do.
It's a weird way of saying this is how you get to sleep nicely. So the first step of sleep hygiene is regularity.
Okay.
That's going to be the most important deciding factor in your quality of sleep.
Going to the bed at the same time, waking up at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And hopefully that will even out into a good 7 hours for you.
And your body will probably get into the rhythm as well, and you'll start feeling tired. Like the first night you try to go to bed earlier, you're probably not going to get it right, but in a week or 2, 4, whatever weeks time, you're going to start feeling tired. at 8 or 9 or 10.
Exactly.
Because you're now used to it. You're getting into a new cycle.
Exactly, and that also ties into step number 2 of sleep hygiene, which is light.
Okay.
So if you are trying to create a certain time that you would like to go to bed, the first thing you need to do is make sure that your light sources are correct. Certain light can be very harmful for sleep, specifically blue light. So the first thing you can do is do candles and yellow lights at night. Following that, you keep yourself cool. When your body temperature dips, your body automatically starts to think it's going into sleep. Then you can keep your hands and your feet warm while keeping your chest cool. Because your heat radiates out of your hands, but your body is trying to cool down the rest of it. So you want your hands to be warm, your feet to be warm, but your chest and body to be cool. And then finally, the ideal thing is to not go to bed too hungry and not go to bed too full.
Too full.
And those are the 5 key steps to sleep.
And they're pretty easy. I mean, we can all do that.
Easier said than done.
Or try 1 or 2 or 3 of them at least.
Yeah.
Practice makes perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's worth it at the end of the day. Even if it's not that easy, like, it's worth trying it, because we just, talked about what the effects of not sleeping can have on you and whatever. Okay, but unfortunately that's all we have time for today. Can you believe how quickly we just ran out of time? But luckily we have another episode coming up where we're going to talk more about everything we started off with today. Massimo, thank you so much for coming in today. And I look forward to picking up where we left next week.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Feed Me Honesty is a South African lifestyle podcast hosted by Hazel Priscilla and produced with the generous assistance of Blended Podcasts, brought to you by Blended Audio.